Hello, my friends. I'm Rick, and this is your seat at the table. And with me is little Missy. She's sitting over here in a cat carrier at the moment, behaving herself. Because, look at monster mythology if you want to hear more about little Missy. Because we're not going to bog down on this one on that. So we're looking at another supplement from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, and this will be the green cover series. And something that I meant to bring up that is worth noting. Of all the books that were produced in the 80s and 90s, this series, this one and the blue series like this one and the brown series, they use plastic covers. These were kind of inventive and different because they're extremely durable, and they're actually, you can wipe them off if you spill stuff on them. They have held up the test of time real well. You consider that these books were produced in the 80s and early 90s. Let's see, this one here was produced 1992, so this is held up extremely well considering, and I will acknowledge that I've got a little storage issue. This came from some moisture. These been exposed to numerous things over the decades. Anyway, this is another source book that I really never had a use for. I've read through it, I've glanced at it a few times, but it has probably only been picked up and utilized a half dozen times in its existence, which makes it very low mileage, right? And I paid $15 for it according to that. So in 1992 money, that was $15. So I guess by today's standards, it would be $35 today, $40. So when I look at the god-awful price of source books, game books in general that are out there, and I'm like, oh, 50, 60 bucks. Oh my God, I can't afford that. That's horrible. It's in part because I'm going back to 1990s economy and remembering that I was paying a lot of money for this stuff back then. I just didn't think about it. When you talk about dropping 15 bucks, well, I go to the store, that $50 would get me 2 or 3 books. But that $50 was out of a $200 check, so I was actually burning through a quarter of my paycheck to do that every week. It would be the equivalent to that now. I mean, on a normally good week, I can take home about $600. And if I dropped about $50 to $60 out of that every week, well, you're still spending up $200, the equivalent $200 plus a month versus the same amount that I was getting back then, but I'm just not getting as much material returns for my dollar. It just shows you just how crappy the economy has been and how most of us working stuff have gotten screwed since Reagan. But we're too stupid collectively to understand it, and we're too much like lemmings and sheep to listen to do anything about it by getting people elected that actually give a shit about you, me, and anyway, never mind. So we're looking at Charlemagne's Paladins campaign source book. So this was set up in Charlemagne's the Middle Ages Europe, right? What's eventually becomes France and some other parts of that area of Europe. So there's a lot of mythology, a lot of novels and stories revolving around the era and around Charlemagne himself. So that's probably why somebody thought, oh, this would be a really good thing. A real good addition. When we really get into, I hate to use the term, what do they call that, splat books. I really hate to use the term because when I think of splat books, I think it's something a little different from what other people do. But this is one of those kind of books. This book has absolutely no real value for the Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition set whatsoever. And it's not even designed to be set and run in a existing D&D style world. So, but what it gives you is that alternate reality option. So you could set up a non-magic driven, non-monster canon driven world setting in the real world based on the mechanics and stuff that's available and the settings that are available in this book and the books like the Vikings and things like that. So when we get into this, we talk about historical role playing, running campaigns, giving you a little bit more information on it. Charlemagne and his times, explain him, his empire, how things worked, how things didn't work. They give you a timeline year-wise, the decline, the suggested reading if you want to get more information on it. Character cast ability, what's available, what's not, permitted warrior kits, etc. Permitted kits, period, varies based on the classes, and then what races are accepted and what's not acceptable when it comes to things like you're not going to have a bunch of elves, dwarves, and things like that in the strictest sense of the Dungeons and Dragons settings. So then we get into chapter 4, the setting itself, the lands and age of Charlemagne, the empire, Franca, Austria, Neustria, Burgundy, Aquitaine, a bunch of places that are long gone. So here's most of France. Subject lands of the empire, foreign lands, the frontiers, etc. Yes, little Mitchie. Was that you? Is that you or somebody crying at your door? Yeah, you're fine. Be out of there before you know it. World of the Frankish Empire, blah, blah, blah. So the setting is really rich. There's a lot of information. The only value I ever got out of this book particularly was as ideas for settings in the various campaigns that I were running and doing. And I don't know, the younger I was, the more effort and time and detail and obsession I put into world building. I really wanted to get all the nuts and bolts. I wanted to have as thorough a world building setup as I could, and a lot of times that cost time and delays at the game table because I'd get bogged down in the details, and my players are like, yes, yeah, that's great, can we get on with it, right? And so it's one of those challenges that I still roll with and still fight with to this day. I'm more pragmatic and pessimistic about things than I was 30, 40 years ago. So anyway, priests and monks, the art of war, faith and superstition, the Western Church, Christian ideals, ritual and superstition, the clergy, the Teutonic Panathlon, pagan myths. All right, so let's just look at the Panathlon too. Ideally, what you would be supplementing is, as you would have the one faith, whether you're Muslim or Christian or Jewish, but within the individual faith, you would have a Panathlon, mostly in the case of things like saints. So you would have all these quote avatars of the Almighty as the in variations on having different gods and goddesses, kind of Panathlon thing. And we got available equipment treasure, things that would be considered normal at that era and time, magical items. It goes into some detail about discussing the differences between magic items and religious icons, relics, and how they don't, magic could be extremely rare in this setting because it's set in the real world, and real world magic doesn't exist as far as we both know. So Tales of Charlemagne and his Paladins, that's chapter 6, and goes on the horn of Sir Ogler the Dane, and the horn of Roland, and Malagigi the wizard, and another parallel of the Arthur Merlin mythology kind of stuff, and so on and so forth. So, and then there's the nice little map that's attached. As you can see, I never removed the map, so it's still as pristine and as the original, it was when it first came out. And a little bit of information is on doing adventures and things in the setting, potentially. So like I said, this was an interesting read, and I acquired it once again in part because I was collecting. Really, I was collecting. Even when I bought this book, in my mind now, and I look back at this and thinking, this is a book I probably was sitting at that bookshelf going, do I want to buy this? And looking at other material. Because what would occasionally happen? A good game company can put out a number of items every month, so I would go in and I would buy my favorite stuff, and I would buy whatever my flavor was at the time, and whatever was available, and I would buy that because it was adding to my collection. And then I would go to my number 2 and number 3, but there was actually be times where you could come in and you go, well, there's nothing here that's really needs to be. So at this point, what do I get? I'm here, I'm spending money on something, and that's probably how this one here ended up in my shelf, along like the Viking book. It just is what it is. I don't think I'd have bought in today's world and how tight things are financially today. Now, one of the big differences for me back then was I was still living with my parents. I didn't have to worry about rent and utilities. All I do was worry about feeding myself and taking care of my crappy car and doing whatever I wanted. And I'm just saying, that's right, little Missy. I had to do whatever I wanted. Not necessarily a good thing. It did not do me well as I got older. Anyway, till next time, you guys have yourself a great weekend. From me and little Missy crying in the corner. Yes, yes, I know. Yeah.